and happy Friday. I'm excited for this conversation today. Today, I get the pleasure of talking to my friend Claudette Rowley. Claudette owns R&W Homes. She is a real estate investor and an interior designer. She has a lifelong passion for transformation, houses, color, and design. As early as she can remember, color and design stimulated her, drove her choices, and motivated her self-expression. As a child, Claudette spent hours in fabric stores selecting clothing patterns and materials. While babysitting as a young teenager, she remembers analyzing home interiors and reading fashion and home decor magazines. Of course, this was after the kids went to bed.
Of course.
And with 30 years of leadership and project management experience, Claudette understands the importance of building trust-based relationships with clients, acting with integrity, and communicating with compassion. Throughout her career, she has always been designing and managing projects, training and coaching programs, organizational change processes, and business cultures. Now she applies her design and project management skills to build environments. I love that. Welcome, Claudette. I'm excited to have this conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Francine. I'm happy to be here. Yeah.
So share with the listeners a little bit about your story, because you've had, I think you said this is like your third career, right? So
Yeah,
what
technically fourth, right? Yeah,
fourth,
yeah, yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
share a little bit about how you got here and what inspired you to take this leap.
Yeah, I'm happy to. Thanks. During the pandemic, one of the gifts of the pandemic, right, was that I led a little bit of a slower life, which I normally don't do. And I ended up taking a color class online, this 2-day color class with a woman named Maria Killam, who's a really well-known color consultant in Canada. And I had been following her work for a while. And so I'm like, I love color. I'm just going to take this class. I mean, why not? Right. So I learned a
Nothing else to
ton.
do, right?
Right. Nothing else to do. Right. I learned a ton. It was really great. It was really inspiring, really energizing. And so halfway through, I'm like, I wonder if I could do this professionally, and I started Googling interior design and I started looking it up and sort of one thing led to the next. And I started, while still keeping my day job, I started working and, learning interior design and getting some projects and did some initial, a friend of mine was doing a home renovation. And so I did a pro bono thing for them for the experience of doing it, and really was captivated by it. Like I just felt so energized. I joined a mastermind group. So I was learning in these non-traditional ways, which were really fun. And then I started to get some paying projects, and I was like, I like this, but I don't love the client part of it. Like, because it was so understandably, our spaces are so personal, right? Like my office, this is my home office, is painted red because that's my favorite color, right? So this is this space is all about me, right? It's very personal. Your
Right.
office the same way, it's personal, right? And so of course, when you're working with people and helping transform their spaces, it's really joyful and fun, and they can get very stressed. They can get very nervous. They can have hard time making decisions, and that part of it wasn't super joyful for me. And so I started looking for other ways to apply design. And I was talking with an interior designer in Florida, I had networked with, and she's like, I found the same thing. So she said, I started also doing interior design for contractors who are flipping or who are building new construction and designing their interior finishes. Like, this is your flooring, this is your paint color, these are your countertops, this is your tile, right? The things that the contractors didn't want to pick out, usually, that wasn't their sweet spot. They weren't super interested in it. And so I'm like, that's a really great idea. I would love to do that. And then someone mentioned flipping to me. And then I was this Memorial Day weekend of 2023, because I remember sitting outside and I'm on my phone and I'm researching like real estate investment groups and contractor groups because I wanted to connect with them. And all of a sudden, of course, this ad comes up on Facebook for this program called the Flip Sisters.
Of course.
Of course, right? So I'm like, that's really interesting, women who flip. So I started researching that and joined that program like 3 days later. And it's a really great program, the Flip Sisters. all virtual, very coaching based, mindset based, and they teach you how to flip, right? And so that's I so very unexpectedly ended up flipping. That was never part of the program, right? Or
Yeah.
the plan, but it's where design really led me. And it's been a really fascinating, experience ever since.
Is most of your work in that now, or do you still work with clients one-on-one?
Well, for the last year or so, because my flip project's been pretty extensive, I've been doing that pretty much solely, and I've gotten involved in other forms of interior design. I'm sorry, other forms of real estate investing, but I do a little bit of client work still. In fact, I have a color consultation next week, so if something shows up, yes,
Yeah.
and
And it
yeah,
is, you talk about it being personal,
yeah,
and it's so true. And I am I just say that is something, it is not in my skills. I have a lot of skill sets. Design is not
yeah,
in one of them. And Claudette has been to my house and has helped me with some choices and things like that around
yeah.
my house. And one of the things I'm realizing too, I've learned my human design a little bit lately, and I'm a manifesting generator, and I do well with response. So when somebody
Hmm.
says, "What color do you want to paint your house?" I
Hmm.
can't answer them, but if they say, "Do you want to paint it blue or green?" I can choose green. Do you want to do it
Right.
light or dark? Right? Like I can do that. And so when I moved into my house, the previous owner, let's just say, had some very unique design
Hmm.
choices, and she
Hmm.
painted our house. I don't know if I ever showed you the picture of these. It was called Iced Cranberry.
I did see the pictures.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
So very unique. And she
Right.
sponged it and it was horrible and the whole bit. So when we
Yeah.
first got in, we painted everything white. And then after a few
Hmm.
years, we wanted to do something. So I hired a designer.
Hmm.
And this has got to be close to, we've been in the house 23 years, probably 18, 20 years ago. And I hired this woman, and back then, like bold colors were big, and we had
Right.
an accent wall, similar to your background, but it was in my
Yeah.
living room. I chose a terracotta wall, accent wall with tan. The other three walls were tan, and then my dining room was like a soft green and really earthy colors.
Right. Right.
Well, she was going to make a valance for my
Mhm.
picture window in my living room. And we picked out the fabric. And I
Mhm.
am not a big florally person.
Right.
I'm very clean lines, right? Like there's few things I know that I like, but I know I don't like really country, if you will,
Hmm.
look.
Right. Right.
And so she said, it's going to take me 6 weeks or whatever. And at week 4, she informs me that the fabric has been discontinued.
Okay.
Okay, fine. So now I have to find another fabric. Well, that took months, and everything she showed me, and I was going to my own fabric stores, but everything she was showing me, I was like, what am I not communicating? Because I liked the first one, and you're showing me things that do not resonate with that. Like it
Yeah.
started to
Yeah.
get, as the homeowner, I was really getting frustrated.
Right.
And at one point, this went on for months because I was in
Hmm.
fabric, so I just could not
Hmm.
find what I liked. And I got to a place where I was like, fine, this is the lesser, we found one. I was like, this is the lesser of the two evils. Just pick it. I don't care. And
Right. I
later
don't
that
care
day,
anymore.
I don't
Yeah.
care anymore. Like I just
Right.
need this to be over with. But it was
Right.
a really frustrating because I just didn't feel like I was being heard. Right. She
Right.
was
Right.
using her style and not mine.
Right. Right.
Later that day after I chose one, I don't know, like the office admin called me and she said, "We just got a new fabric in. I think this is it for you." And it wasn't florally, it was more
Hmm.
just like clean, just fun, if you
Yeah.
will.
Yeah.
But I remember being just like throwing my arms up and just being so frustrated with that process because I just felt like she wasn't listening to me.
Hmm.
And that is, like you have your style and then your client has theirs. So
Right.
how do you, work with your clients and maybe think, oh God, this is so hideous, but you like it and I'm gonna have to work
Right.
with it.
Yeah. It's such a great question. And part of working with people and helping them design spaces is exactly what you said is you really have to listen super closely. And I used to be a coach, right? So that's pretty easy
Right.
for me. Right. But to really listen to what people want and need, just like anything else we do with client work. And that's super important. And I was doing a project and it was a bathroom renovation, half bath. And the owner said, I really want this kind of overhead light. And I was just like, how do I diplomatically let her know that this just seriously is not going to work, but not
Right.
like that. You know what I mean? And eventually I was able to say, well, the problem is, code says that a bathroom light can't be lower than what I forget what the measurement was, can't be lower than this. And so there's no, this style of light is never going to meet code. Right. So that's how I
Mm.
was able to get around that one. It's something pragmatic and logical that was outside of my control. Right. I get
Right,
a code.
right.
But yeah, but really listening closely to people. And in her underlying need, when I look back on that, is she wanted something that looked really fun and distinctive, right?
Mm.
So I was able to offer her other options. Like, I know you want something fun and distinctive. It can't be that, but it could be this. Will this work?
Right.
You know? Um, so it's a little bit also like being a detective in the sense that you're listening, and then you need to find a better solution than what someone's come up with for themselves, you know?
Right, right. I
Right.
love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And thinking, I wouldn't even think about that, a bathroom light needing to be to code. So you
Right.
not only have to keep style in mind, but
Right.
also like legal stuff, right?
Right, right. And usually if it's a renovation, the contractor knows some of that, right? But as a designer, you're also still looking at some of that. Like, oh, I'm
Responsible for
looking at a
that.
bathroom layout. Okay, well, how much space do I need on either side of the toilet? I'm not technically responsible for that, but when I'm designing, I need to at least be thinking about it and asking the questions.
Sure.
So it's design's interesting in the sense the skill set is very broad. But I like to learn, so that's been fun. So.
Right. How do you stay current with design while also balancing like a timelessness, right? So,
Yeah.
I love your red wall, but
Mhm.
in 5 years, that might be too much, right? And now you've
Totally.
got to
Yeah.
paint again, right? So,
Right.
how
Right.
do you
Right.
balance that?
I think with my house particular is quite colorful because that's my personal style, right?
Yeah,
And I already, like you said, I know if and when we decide to sell this house, I have to do a lot of repainting. This
right.
room can't be red. But I think the balance is, staying current. I mean, with all of everything digital, it becomes fairly easy because you have Pinterest. I read a lot of magazines. I still like paper. You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
go to Barnes and Noble, get things. So just by reading and reviewing and watching, right, you can tell what's on point and on trend. But to your point about timelessness, it's really important when again you're helping someone with their interior space, knowing, all right, is this their forever home? In which case we can do anything because,
right,
right? Or are they planning to sell in the next few years? Like, what's their plan related to that? And how do we design something that other people will actually want, especially if it's tile or something that's hard to change, right? Paint is easy, right? You can always
right,
repaint. So it's just really finding out, it's sort of balancing all of that. What are our personal needs? What are the pragmatics of it? And how do we pull that together? When I'm designing for my flips, that's interesting because at that point you're looking at what do people buy in that town, right? So I'm
yeah,
researching like, okay, this house sold really fast at around the same price point, right? So what did that interior look like? What did that kitchen, especially the kitchens and the bathrooms, right? What do
yeah,
the kitchens and bathrooms look like? Okay, I need to come up with something that reasonably replicates that. Not the same thing, but in the
sure.
ballpark. So we know like people are going to buy this, and this is what it looks like. Which is also a really interesting and fun, process to like again just figure all that out and put something
Right.
together that when buyers come through, they're like, oh, I really like this. Yeah.
When you're choosing a flip, so let's just chat about that for a minute because that's fascinating. Because, and I can also imagine it's a little daunting. I know
Yeah.
you have one now that you're waiting to sell, right?
Yeah, I
So,
do. Yeah.
to talk us through that process for somebody who's, curious about what is the whole process of flipping and how do you then decide colors and the design? Are you going to other open houses to your point of like I want it to match other ones, or how are you making that decision?
Yeah. So the process of flipping is like yeah, it can be a little bit daunting, right? The front end's really numbers, right? It's just if this property costs this much, how much can I sell it for? Right? How much is the rehab going to cost? Right? And all the other costs associated with like holding a loan and all that stuff. And then you have to make sure, if the numbers work, right? Then you put in your offer. So the front end is all math, really. It's like math and
Right.
analysis, right? But let's say, once you have the property, right? you've hired your contractors, right? You have a project management schedule, you have all those things, and that's really what flipping ends up being about, is making sure you, stay on budget as much as possible. Things do come up, but you stay on budget, you stay on schedule, right? And then you sell, and that's how you make your profit. But your question, I haven't gone to other open houses too much for that. I absolutely could. I've done more online analysis, but
Okay.
you're really looking at what, like, what are people buying? What do they like? What's selling? And it was really interesting. My current flips in Amesbury, and a lot of the things that were condos that were selling well had actually somewhat dated kitchens. A
Mm,
lot of condos were designed, with the earlier in time. I forget when they were built, but there are a lot of the dark cherry cabinets with the black granite. I mean, which is beautiful, right? But not particularly current, right?
right.
Nothing wrong with it, just not particularly current. So I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to do that. Right? So I'm not gonna, right? So then I had to really look at other. Then I started looking at houses and other options. And what I ended up doing in that particular condo is natural wood cabinets, because those have just come back in, right? So natural wood cabinets, a light oak, that's really pretty. A off-white quartz countertop with some gray and beige veining, because beige and warm colors have just come back in. And then a backsplash that, I don't know how to describe it. It is subway tile, but it's three different color tiles, and that was how it came. Like, one is
Okay.
like off-white, one is super light beige, one's slightly like a gray beige. Anyway, so when you look at it, it's not dramatic, but it has interest, because the color sort of shifts. So, and then I went with gold, a mixture of gold and silver, gold and polished nickel, um, metals in there. So for the lighting, the
So you
faucet, the
can mix,
handles,
right?
yeah,
Like,
you can mix
so
and match. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so that's interesting because like I feel like it's either gold or silver,
Right,
because
yeah,
there's these old time, it's kind of
yeah,
like you can't wear stripes and polka dots, right? But
right,
when you're
exactly.
doing right, but
Right.
those aren't true anymore, right?
Right,
Like
that's
that
not
really
true. Right,
isn't
right.
true. Oh, I love that.
Yeah,
Okay.
you can mix metals. That sort of became in a few years ago, and I love it too, because it makes things more interesting, right?
Yeah,
Because you can, as long as you know how to do it, um, it makes things more interesting in a room in a way that doesn't cost you any more, right?
sure.
Now
Yeah,
you can go get all your cabinet handles. I did from Home Depot, right? We're on a budget, so
right.
doesn't they don't look like, oh, those came from Home Depot, so you can get creative. Yeah.
Other than paint, because I think everybody knows that, but like, what are some other things that people can do to maybe refresh a space that they're in?
Yeah, such a great question. So it could, like, paint, of course. It can also be even changing out your accessories, right?
Mm,
So do I want to, could I get new lamps? Can I change my throw pillows? Do I have artwork? Maybe I have stuck in a closet somewhere I don't use anymore, but wow, I've had that happen in my own house. Like, oh, I forgot about this. That would really work well in this room,
yeah,
So you can even shuffle around things in your own house from different rooms, or even, head out to Home Goods or Home Sense, or you know what I mean? It doesn't have to be expensive in any way.
right,
Um, get new lamps, get new throw pillows. If you have an area rug, you get a different area rug. It could be that, I'm just looking at your office, and I know you have also gray in the main parts of your house as well. And it's just a really beautiful gray, but gray is nice because, or beige, because you can change. Let's say, if someone had, I don't know, purple accents in one of their rooms, and they're like, I'm sick of this purple. Well, then maybe you go with pink, maybe you go with red, maybe you go with green,
right.
depends on your gray or yellow, right? You can just change up the color scheme. Yeah.
Yeah, that was one of the reasons when I worked with a designer years ago, pre-COVID, and
Hmm.
she had picked out all the colors for me, and we painted like everybody else in COVID.
Right.
And like I said, I had all these really intense earthy colors prior to that, and I had a
Yeah.
really hard time decorating
It's harder, right?
and bringing things in, right? Because again,
Yes.
everything was these big flowers, and I just wasn't
Yeah.
that. So when I painted gray, and I will say, and I think I think I shared this with you before, all of my furniture in my dining room was a mismatch from other people. And last year we bought
Hmm.
new furniture, and it became
Right.
mine.
Right.
And I would say I've been in this house 23 years, and really only in the last year have I actually gone to Home Goods and bought things to bring in. And
Yeah.
the gray, having the gray as the background,
Hmm.
I feel like I have so much more opportunity and ability to bring in
Mhm.
other colors. So
Right,
one room might have purples in it and one has more teals,
right,
and it works because the foundation is the gray, and then I
right,
can bring in the other colors. And for me, for somebody who doesn't have the eye, like I walk into people's houses and I'm like, how can that looks amazing, and I would never think to put those things together, right? Like the
right, right.
golden. So for me, I needed the clean palette.
Yeah.
So I didn't feel like I was trying to compete or match the bold
Mhm.
colors.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And that's one of the benefits of the neutral paint colors, right? Your off-whites, your creams, your grays, light beiges, that sort of thing. Exactly what you said is you can more easily bring in the color.
yeah,
Right, right. No, it's totally true. And it makes it really in what you said about your furniture, was interesting. I had a similar experience. We moved into our current house 5 years ago, and when we were moving in, I was like, how much of this furniture have I actually bought? You know what I mean? Like we definitely bought some furniture together when we got married, but I'm like that my dad made that, which was wonderful to have furniture my father made, right? My
sure.
dad made that, but this was like a hand me down from my parents. This was this, and I'm like, I had this moment kind of like you did of like, I really want to buy my own furniture.
Right.
I really actually do want to buy my own furniture, right? So, and it was really fun and kind of empowering in a way, like this is all I bought, all this I purchased this, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And what I realized was I never really wanted to decorate or, do anything in my dining room because I didn't really like the foundational things that
Right,
were in there. And
right.
now I just feel like I have so much. I mean, I have curtains for the first time in 23 years,
You're
right?
right,
Because I
yeah.
just was like, what am I put what why bother? Right. It was like, what do they
Right.
say? Putting lipstick on a pig. That's what
Big,
it
right,
felt
right,
like.
right, right.
Right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah.
sure, throw up some curtains, but it's really not going to do anything because the room, I still didn't love the room. And what was the irony was when we were home shopping for homes 20 some odd years ago, the main thing I wanted was the dining room. Like I wanted a home with a dining room because
Mhm.
I host a lot. I host
Right,
Thanksgiving, right? I host parties. So that was so important to me. And it really wasn't until we got new furniture that I realized how much I was just tolerating. And,
right.
everything was functional. And I think
Yeah,
when you and I worked together last year or whenever that was, you would ask me, what do you like in this room? It's functional. Everything was functional, but there was
right,
nothing
yeah.
that I was like, oh my God, I love my china cabinet. I love my,
Yeah,
right? Like now I'm like, oh, that looks really cool every time I walk in the room, right?
yeah,
It makes
yeah.
such a difference.
It does. I mean, your whole dining room is completely transformed. And
Yeah.
when I walk into, is there recently just the energy of it, just the way it feels to be in there is
Yeah.
completely different, right? And
Yeah.
it's also, you know, well, the other thing I'm thinking about as you were talking is you mentioned rooms being pragmatic, which is important, right? Our design has to
Sure.
be too, right? But you are also this really fun person, right? So you're in these rooms that weren't a reflection of you, right?
Right.
They weren't fun.
Yeah, and I
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
even
yeah,
think I realized that until you
yeah.
actually pointed that out, and I was like,
Right.
"Huh, oh, yeah, you're kinda right," right?
Yeah, right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, they didn't
Um,
align.
how do you approach small spaces or maybe challenging layouts, right?
Mhm,
So you mentioned
mhm.
earlier a bath, right? Like
Right.
my bath is really tiny, right?
Yeah.
So there are certain areas that are really small. How do you approach those spaces and make them maybe either look bigger or just nicer and
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's an opportunity to get really creative because like you said, the small space is a challenge, right? So it's the functional piece first about what do we need to do in this space, right? What needs to be in this space, right, for it to work and be functional. So you start there. And then you design from there, right? But it could be all spaces are interesting depending on the person's style, of course, with that caveat and what they want, but it can be a good place to use a saturated color, right? Because that can make the space look bigger. Some people don't like that, so you don't do that if
when
they
you
don't
say
like.
saturated color,
Oh, like
I think I know what that
oh,
means, but
what do I mean? Yeah, absolutely. Like it could, like this red is a saturated color.
okay.
Most people don't want red, but it could be like a deep blue or a deep
Yeah,
green,
okay.
kind of this, yeah.
And that
Something,
would make the space look bigger. A dark, like
yeah, you can
interesting,
make it,
because you would think the opposite,
you
right?
would, you would think the opposite.
Fascinating. Okay.
Yeah, it brings a certain depth to it. So then
Okay.
colors interesting that, right? So you could if someone like that,
You
and
just made me want to paint my bathroom.
right, exactly, right. It also can make it that sort of like a dark blue or green or
Yeah.
whatever color, brown. Can also, for a lot of people, can feel very cozy as well. So it
Yeah.
depends how you want to feel in the space, which is a question I always ask people, like, how do you want to feel in your space? Yeah. Like in your bedroom, for example, most people want to feel peaceful and calm, right?
Mm,
Our kitchen and living room, yeah, you want to feel peaceful or calm, but you also, it's in that place where we should be energized as well. We're going to be
right.
cooking, we're going to be socializing, we're going to be whatever. So it's thinking about that. But with small spaces, yeah, you're really, it's like I said, an opportunity to be creative. You're looking at how you're using your space. And then, then you're often on a search for what kind of, if it's cabinetry or built-ins, or what can I do to maximize this potential, right? Could this be an office and a guest room and my workout room? Okay, if you have multiple uses for small spaces,
Right.
how can we store things, right? How can we put this over here? How can we make it work? So those are some of the things you start doing, is really getting creative about storage, creative about color, and how can you maximize the use of the space? Because oftentimes I've noticed that when people have a small space, this isn't always true, but sometimes they have to use it more than one way. Maybe it's a
Sure.
small
Yeah.
apartment, right? You know what I
Right.
mean? Or something
Right.
like that. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Your kitchen is also your bedroom.
yeah. Right. Yeah. You never know, right? Yeah. Right.
What's been your favorite design project to date and why?
And why? Um, I'm just going to go with, I'm also a manifesting generator. Speaking of human design,
Yeah.
it's related to what you were saying. So that's why I was about to say, I'm just going to go with my gut on this without
Yeah.
thinking about it too much. I've enjoyed all of them, but my favorite one was I mentioned this half bath, right? Um, it was a half bath project, and it was a powder room that, in a renovation where, and what was important about this bathroom, it's also the bathroom guests would have been using, right? So it was off the mud room. They wanted to be a very welcoming space. They wanted the bathroom to have a little bit of pizzazz to it, a little bit of an element of surprise, because this is what guests and the family used it too, but guests were using. So we ended up with this really amazing wallpaper.
Mm.
And it was this really cool kind of tropical looking green and pink, kind of a coral, not pink, pink, but coral kind of color wallpaper. And it was one of those things where um, we found it pretty quickly, but the clients were a little concerned that it was too much, understandably, of course, right? So then we looked at, many other wallpapers, and then, of course, like anything else, right? You find the dress you want, but you look at 100 more dresses just to
Right.
the right dress. So I get it. I get the process, right? And then we ended up in the end going with the wallpaper,
Yeah.
and they loved it. And that's part of what made it so fun for me, is in the end, I knew it was going to look really good, but it's also not my bathroom. And I understand,
Right.
being,
Right.
but they loved it. And what they also loved about it is everyone who came into their house was like, that is a really cool bathroom,
Yeah.
so they achieved their objective. And so for those reasons, that was one of my favorite ones, just because everyone was so happy in the end, and they, stretched a little bit. It was outside of their normal uh,
Right.
decorating style, right? It wasn't normally what they would have picked. So it was fun.
We talk about wallpaper a little bit because I've actually been toying with that, but I feel
Yeah.
like when I think of wallpaper, I
Yeah.
think of it being outdated. That's what I grew up with. Everything was
Oh, right.
wallpapered, right? But
Mhm.
is it coming back? Like, are there, I mean, I see it in
Yeah.
homes, and
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
been toying with that a little bit in like my mud room, one of the walls. Like that would be fun
Right.
when they walk in
Yeah.
to have this fun wallpaper. So are there things that, is that timeless, or is it like what has changed with wallpaper?
You do see a lot of wallpaper right now. I mean, maybe not in people's homes as much, but in design magazines, or
Okay.
Pinterest and things, social media, right? And bedrooms, powder rooms, right? The half baths, mudrooms, like you said, are a great place, right?
Yeah.
These are sort of safe, safe places, right? A mudroom or a bathroom, right? Bedroom. So you do see it, and timeless. I think it depends on what you select, right? So there's certain wallpapers that are not going to be timeless. But one thing, people will even do is get the solid color grass cloth wallpaper, because it brings texture to your wall, right? So
Hmm.
that's definitely timeless. Anything like that without a pattern is going to be timeless, right? But it brings texture, it brings interest. And I'm definitely seeing more of that. I've seen also a trend, and this totally depends on the bedroom because it wouldn't work for some people in some bedrooms, but where the wallpaper will also extend into the ceiling, which is really interesting. So
Ooh,
it creates this
okay.
very kind of cozy space, right?
Yeah,
People doing wallpaper as an accent behind just one wall, like behind the bed, right? Because
yeah,
maybe it's a really long, big wall, and you need to, you need to bring visual interest to that space so it doesn't look like a big wall,
right,
right?
right.
So wallpaper is really, I mean, it's a pretty fairly inexpensive, depending on the wallpaper you pick, of course, but fairly inexpensive way to bring something fun,
I love that.
bring something really fun, yeah,
Are there
into a space.
certain, I feel like everybody's been painting gray in the last few
Right.
years, right? So are there um themes of color? I don't even know how to ask that question, but like are
Yeah.
there, okay, it's a gray year, it's a green year, it's a, because when I
Oh
did
yeah.
my
Trends. Yeah.
terracotta trend, thank you, that
Or
was the
yeah,
word
yeah.
I was, thank you,
Yeah, yeah.
menopause, for
Right. Yeah.
losing words.
Yeah.
But like when I painted my terracotta wall, big but bold walls were big, that was right
Brand.
20
Right.
years
Yeah.
ago, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
are there trends and how do you stay, stay with that and not have to paint your, your walls every
Every 2 years.
5 years?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So most trends last like 10 to 12 years. So they
Okay.
last fairly long. And then, and you're right, we had the, with the terracotta and all that was this, what was called the Tuscan trend. It was
Okay. Is
those
that what
types
I
of
didn't even
colors, a
know?
lot of those.
I didn't even know my trend had a name. Okay.
Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah. So the and that was when you saw like a lot of browns as
Yeah.
well, right? And a lot of kitchens in that sort of Tuscan brown, right, color and all the golds, right, and all of
Yeah.
that. Terracotta, all that. And then yes, then we had the gray, we moved into the gray trend, right? And gray is beautiful and timeless, right? Especially a gray like you have, which is that lighter gray, right?
Yeah.
Um, it seems it's fresh, right? We've more recently moved, there's a more of a move into back to some of the beiges, like some of the natural wood, like I mentioned, natural wood cabinets. So not all cabinets are white and gray. A lot of them still are, of course. That's a beautiful combination. Um, so how, some of it is again, when you start looking at, if you Google like what's trends in 2024, 2025,
Yeah.
like, you'll see what it is, but it, if you if you read any design magazines at all, if anybody does, right? You can see like as they start changing, the trends changing. It's just,
Right. Right.
and I don't even know who makes these decisions, right?
Right.
Somehow the new trends emerge, just like with
Right.
clothing, right? Somehow the designers,
Benjamin Moore's like, we need to sell
right,
this gray. This is
right,
the
to
new
sell this
trend. We
gray,
made too
right,
much.
right. So it's just, I think, the higher level designers in whatever field, right,
Sure.
or
Right.
setting these trends that flood on the rest of us. But right now what we're seeing trend wise is, grays are still beautiful, and we're bringing some warmth back in with some of the beiges, and some more natural wood, and more of the natural world, like, plants and greenery and that kind of thing. So
Nice.
that tends to be where, it's where we're moving into right now, which I love personally, because I like the natural world. I like natural wood color, so for me personally, I was really excited because I redid my kitchen 2 summers ago, and I did it in my style with natural wood cabinets and a lot of olive greens and yellow greens in the tile, and it was like
And now you're
totally,
trendy.
I was out of trend completely,
Yeah.
right? Because it was what I wanted, and now I'm in trend. Yes.
Yeah. And would you recommend to do what feels better for you than staying trendy?
I typically do, because that's kind
Yeah.
of who I'm as a person, with the one caveat being, unless you're planning to sell your
Sell your
house in the next
house.
few
Yeah.
years, right? Because the one thing you don't want to do is have somebody come into the kitchen that you loved, right? That you just renovated, and have them be like, ugh,
Right.
we have to change this entire kitchen. Do we really want to buy this house? You know what I mean? So it's just thinking the
Yeah.
trends are important if you're going to sell.
Yeah.
It's important to
What
know what
do you
people
have
are. Yeah.
favorite materials and finishes that you work with?
That's a really great question. I would say not specifically. I think it's so, I have stores that I love to go to. I will say that. But in terms of materials and finishes, it's so specific to the client or the project.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I would say less so specific. I mean, personally, I have my favorites, right? But when I'm working, it's such a great question. It's just that when I'm working with a client, or I'm working with a flip, which is a client in its own way,
Sure.
I'm really thinking about what's going to work here. You know what I mean? I spend a lot of time on tile for sure, always.
Okay.
whether it's bathroom, kitchen, because again, it's really hard to change. So you really want to get that
You
right.
want to really like it.
Yeah. 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 Or you want to make sure you don't want to walk in the bathroom, you just design and go, oh, gee, I don't know, think I like
Yeah.
it. I never want to have that experience. Um, I love hardwood. So I'm, as most of us do, right?
Yeah.
But gravitating toward that as well. Hardwood, I pay a lot of attention to tile. I mean, I pay a lot of attention to the color because I know how important that's going to be. It's really setting the stage
Yeah.
in a lot of ways for how people are going to feel when they're in the space. And especially if whether you're designing for somebody else, how they feel in the space really matters. If I'm designing for a flip, we want buyers to feel a certain way when they come in, right?
Sure.
So I would say those are a lot of the areas, those foundational areas I spend a lot of time on.
Nice.
Yeah.
So talking about flips and your real estate investment,
Yeah.
how do you actually identify um your investment? Like how do you
Yeah.
decide what you want to invest in and how do you manage that risk?
Yeah. It's, deciding what I invest in is I guess is two things. One is the numbers, right? I really want the numbers have to work. I also want a diverse portfolio. So it's looking at, do I want to buy a rental and have that, cash flow, right? Do I want to do another flip, right? It's really just kind of looking, it's a very strategic thing because it's based on numbers and value you're going to get. And you mitigate risk. There's always some risk in real estate investing and any real
Sure.
estate invest, like people always say that there's always going to be some risk, even when you try to do everything right. Um, but you mitigate risk by, again, running the numbers correctly and also watching the markets, right? What's happening, right? What's happening in the market? I mean, not only the real estate market, but the jobs market, right? Am I investing in a place where jobs are coming into an area, which means the value is likely to go up in housing,
Mm.
right? I don't
Something
want
you
to go,
don't even wouldn't even think about. That's yeah,
right,
but that's
right.
important. Sure.
That kind of stuff is important. Right? Do I want to invest in an area where jobs are leaving? Probably not, right? Because the housing, value of housing may go down. So it's not only, so it's a great question. It's looking at each individual property, certainly, right? Am I going to get value from this? Does this make sense financially? But then you also look at your broader market and picture and see what's going on, right? Like I'm not going to buy, I wouldn't want to be purchasing anything. I probably wouldn't purchase anything again until January.
Okay.
Because what we do know is the presidential election, and this is not a political comment, it doesn't
Right,
matter
right,
who wins,
right.
but the election itself, right, tends to stall the real estate market,
Okay.
right? So it changes it. But once we get all past all of that, right,
Yeah.
no matter what the outcome is, in January, things change again. So, it's also looking at kind of what's happening in the external world.
World. Yeah.
January is also a good time to buy because there's, anybody selling in January probably really needs to sell.
Right.
So it's looking at all of that to help mitigate risk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is your opinion? Do you have an opinion? What is your opinion on the real estate market in the next couple of years? Because I know it's changed so much. I mean, my sister's been looking to buy a house for, gosh, probably close to 6 months now. And she has a townhouse and she
Okay.
doesn't want to sell that. She wants to keep that, but her and her boyfriend want to buy a house and they're having such a hard time because everything is priced so high. And
Right.
she's like, on, online, the pictures are gorgeous. The house looks huge, and you go into it, and it's like this tiny little, home. So things are
Right.
changing.
Yeah.
It's not a buyer's market right now because my understanding is it's not, and the laws are changing. So how do you feel that's going to change over the next couple of years?
It's interesting. It's funny. It's like, it's not a buyer's market. And in some ways, it's not really a seller's market either as a
Yeah.
seller. You know what I mean? It's a funny time, like you said. Um, I think it's definitely slowing, we all know it's slowed down, right? It's been changing over the last couple of years. It seems, what I read is that there's a course correction into a more typical market, like what
Yeah.
we've experienced in the New England area for so long was atypical, right? Where things flying off the shelf, right? And all that. Um, so I think we're course correcting in some ways. And I think, with the interest rates starting to shift a little bit in the downward direction is really good. We see that helping.
Help.
One of the interesting things I'm sorry.
It's going to help.
All
Yeah.
right, it's gonna help. Yeah. One of the interesting things I've heard from my real estate agents for what I'm selling right now, is they said people are really taking their time putting in offers in some cases. Like there's not that, what was we experienced for so long of this sort of like, oh my gosh, four people put in an offer at the end of the
Right.
open house, right? We're not seeing that. We're seeing people taking their time, and really doing more due diligence, right? And being more cautious, right?
Mm,
That's so it's it's like a general slowing down overall, right? And then, what you mentioned about your sister, right? And I see this too with these prices being really high, and then with the interest rates being higher than they used to be a couple of
right.
years ago, right? Making that a lot harder to make those mortgage payments all work. And a lot of sellers thinking, hey, I can still put it on for this really high price.
Right.
So it's an interesting time, of shifting for both buyers and sellers, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
love that. Oh my gosh, I feel like we could talk forever.
Yeah.
What is, as we start to close up, what is one thing that you live by, that you want to share with our listeners?
I'm going to go with what came
I
immediately,
love that.
which is be true to yourself,
Mm,
in design, not only in design, right?
but in
But in
life,
all ways,
yeah.
but in life, and be true to yourself and really listen to yourself and acknowledge what you want and need, right? And go with that.
Yeah.
So,
I love that. Well, at the end of every podcast, I pulled the cards at the beginning, but you get to choose. So I have three cards in front of me. I have a left, a center, and a right. So I'm gonna have you
okay.
choose.
What came to me was right.
All right. Right. Okay. Oh, I love this. And oftentimes I don't look at the cards before, but I
Oh, you
feel like
don't? Okay.
oftentimes they have some theme to the
Okay.
conversation. So this one says adventure, wonderful new experiences fill my life. And I think
Ooh, I love
about,
that.
I mean, design, there's adventure in that, right?
There's definitely adventure.
So
Wonderful
that's
new
the right
experience.
card.
Okay,
So the
cool.
center card is leadership. I am a beacon of radiance, support, and love. And you are the
Beautiful.
leader in your own home, right? For those
Yes, you
people
absolutely are.
listening.
Right.
And left, energy, healing energy and immense vitality flow through me easily and effortlessly. And we didn't talk about energy in
Ooh.
your home and how important that is. Like your space
Yeah, it's
reflects who you
completely
are
in.
and changes your energy as
Yeah,
well.
it
So,
totally does.
all right. I love that.
Great cards. Yay.
Yes. Claudette, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, you're welcome. It was
And
fun.
for
Huh.
those of you listening, thank you for joining me on today's journey towards a more enlightened and decorative life.
Yeah, yeah.
I hope that today's episode has inspired you to embrace your inner wisdom, navigate your path with a renewed sense of purpose. And remember, transformation begins from within. And so to transform your home, you also have to transform within yourself.
Do. Yeah,
So
you
I
do.
invite you to take a moment each day to connect with your higher self and trust that the universe is guiding you towards your highest good. If you found value in today's episode, please download, subscribe, leave a review, and share this podcast with those who might benefit from hearing our conversation today. Your support helps us reach more souls on their spiritual journey. Stay connected with our community. The social media links for both Claudette and I will be in the show notes, as along with our websites. Until next time, please continue to shine your light and walk in peace and love. I am Francine Terrell, and this has been Effin' Fridays with Francine. Claudette, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Francine.